Hello and welcome to another edition of Is It Still Playable? For today's subject, we have another one of these double feature type deals, and of course, as you can already tell, I will be covering both Killzone 2 and Killzone 3 for the PS3. Two games that are now over a decade old, and games that I used to play the hell out of back when I was in my teenage years. But the problem with this video, and what makes it a lot harder for me to cover, is that the player base is non-existent anymore here in 2022. In fact, there hasn't been an active player base in nearly 5 years. No, not because no one is playing the games any longer, but instead due to Sony pulling the plug on its online servers back in March of 2018. Truthfully, I would imagine the amount of players around 2015 and onwards to have been fairly low anyways, but it's still sad to see the servers being pulled entirely. However, good news of sorts is that according to a site called the Sixaxis, you can continue playing Killzone 2's online multiplayer, but it involves messing around and tweaking with your internet settings and stuff I personally haven't done and probably will never do. And I'll leave that article in the description if you guys do want to take a look at it for yourselves. So yeah, that leaves me in a different and kind of an awkward position. I've never actually played a game so far in this series where the servers were completely turned off until now. And the last thing I want to turn this into is some sort of weird tribute memorial piece where we're all singing Kumbaya and reminiscing about days past. No one really gives a shit, honestly. Instead, I'm going to take this in a different direction and talk about a decision that the developers made that makes me very happy. That is the inclusion of an offline multiplayer with bots. Now, to the average person here, they're probably thinking, well, who gives a shit? A lot of games have bots in them and offline multiplayers. And yeah, you'd be right, a lot of games do, but it was not all that common during this time, especially on console. You see, games back then had this annoying, stupid trend of developers focusing a majority of their attention towards its online multiplayers and having campaigns last maybe 5 hours. In some cases, I've seen campaigns take around 3 hours for the average player to beat. Worse, in my opinion, is when developers would go and create these games without any sort of offline modes. No campaigns, anything like that. It was straight up online multiplayer only. And the biggest problem with this, and I've made this argument numerous times in the past, is that if the game doesn't do well commercially, or if it doesn't hold an active player base, the servers eventually get shut down, rendering the games as completely unplayable in every single aspect. Case in point are the two biggest ones for the time, SOCOM Confrontation and MAG. Had they made the games with offline modes, with bots, then I'm sure there would be people still playing the games today. Yeah, the player base might be really small, but it's better than not being able to play the game, period. Anyway, back on topic here, when you select the bot zone option in Killzone 3, you're able to go through a few settings before you can start the match. You can pick your game mode, the map you want to play on, the amount of AI bots, and even the difficulty of the bots. Also worth pointing out that Bot Zone has everything already unlocked for you, unlike the normal multiplayer, so things like your weapons, abilities, upgrades, that sort of stuff, it's all there for you to play with. Some people love this while others hate it. I myself prefer a rank progression type deal similar to that of combat training from the original Black Ops, but again, this is a personal preference. Killzone 2's skirmish mode is a very bare-bones version of Bot Zone. It's the same premise, of course, but you cannot select anything outside of the map, the amount of AI in the game, and of course, their difficulty. No selecting of game modes, anything like that. It's the most basic offline multiplayer you could ever possibly have. It's disappointing and somewhat of a major complaint that I have between both Killzone 2 and Killzone 3's offline multiplayer. For whatever reason, they made it so that you cannot specifically pick what objectives you want to play. It's all completely random, and I really don't understand the thought process behind that. Now, yeah, Killzone 3's Bot Zone, they did include the option of playing 3 different game types, like Team Deathmatch, Operations, which is more of a story-based type objective mode, and then you have Warzone. Warzone is just a hodgepodge of random objective-based modes and the occasional Team Deathmatch. And while I'm on the subject of game modes in Killzone 3, if you play Operations or Guerrilla Warfare, they play as you would expect. Once the objective is completed or the time limit ends, then the match is over, and it'll cycle to the next map if you choose to. Nothing out of the ordinary. But if you pick Warzone, or if you play Skirmish in Killzone 2, the match goes on for an eternity. You actually have to physically end the match. Why they didn't add the option of like a best 2 out of 3 or even like a time limit type thing is kind of weird. One last disappointing, or well, missing feature is that Killzone 3 doesn't have split screen for Bot Zone, but it does for co-op campaign. It's clear they can do it for the campaign, so why didn't they add that option for Bot Zone? Before we move on, if you don't mind, I would like to take a moment here and shout out a clothing company that I randomly came across during my last Where's the Deals episode. I couldn't help but fall in love with the artwork immediately. Every bit of the artwork, all the designs that are put on the clothing and other merch is created by Yhama. The owner is also super cool. We chatted for a little bit, and I couldn't be more impressed by the artwork and Yhama's personality and passion. So yeah, if you are interested, I do have a referral link in the description that'll give you 10% off your entire order. So yeah, give Yhama a look and show the artist some love and support. I'll even link their Facebook page and Instagram in the description as well. Now back to our regular programming. That being said, one thing that has always impressed me about these games, especially Killzone 3, is how well made the bots are. Even on the recruit difficulty, which is the easiest one, their reactions and way they navigate the map is pretty impressive. Playing on the harder difficulties makes it obviously a lot more challenging, but it doesn't ever come across as like hyper unrealistic. They did a good job with the bots, making them mimic real players the best way possible for the time the game came out. I would even go as far as to say that the AI in Killzone 3, specifically, far exceeds some more recent games that have bot implementation. The only other thing I want to note is that I made the mistake of playing Killzone 3 before touching Killzone 2. Sometimes that's not really a problem. Like with the PS2 SOCOM games, I could play any of them and still have that same level of enjoyment, or even Way of the Samurai for that matter. But I noticed just how much more polished Killzone 3 is compared to Killzone 2. With everything really, the controls, graphics, gameplay, even the maps, everything is so much more polished and refined in Killzone 3, which after playing the second game for about an hour, I really didn't have a desire to play it again. And that's where I'm going to bring this video to its asking point of, is it playable in 2022? If you're looking for that online multiplayer, then obviously no, it isn't playable in that regard. But if you're like me and actually enjoy playing against bots, then yeah, it's more than playable, sure. If we were to go about this as like, does it still hold up? Or did it age well? Then that's where things kind of change here. Sometimes, you know, you have these games that you loved as a kid that maybe don't hold up well by today's standards, to where it, like, I don't know, completely throws you off or something. For example, the original Perfect Dark and GoldenEye on the N64 were some of my favorite shooters growing up. But if I were to try and play them today, I would have a bitch of a time because of the controls. Playing an FPS on one analog now, for me, is borderline impossible. Another example of a game that just doesn't age well for me personally is one that I played the hell out of back in the day, Rainbow Six Vegas. But now, I can't play that game for shit simply because of the graphics. They're so unclear for me, and they're so blurry, I really have a hard time seeing anything in front of me. At least on console. PC, completely different story. Killzone 2 is one of those that did not age well for me. The controls, the gameplay, it's all very clunky. The gameplay, well, yeah, it's still fun in its own regard. It's just not as good as I remembered it being. Whereas Killzone 3 isn't like that for me. It's aged really, really well for it being over a decade old. It plays extremely well still to this day. It still looks great, the controls are fine. Everything, like I mentioned, is so much more polished than before. It's a solid shooter. And don't get me wrong, both of these games are great in their own regard. And while I would say that yes, they are both games that are still playable in their offline modes, I don't think I would recommend Killzone 2 like I ever would with Killzone 3. Killzone 3 is just a great game, and I could still very well see myself playing it again in the next decade or two down the road. With Killzone 2, I really don't think I'll ever touch it again for anything outside of its single player. But hey, both games are stupid cheap these days and incredibly easy to find, so I would encourage people to maybe give both of them a shot if they've never played them before. And that's going to do it for today's video, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoy the content. It gives me a better idea of what you guys like to see from me. I don't think I'll cover the PS4 Killzone in the future, but I do have another game in mind that I would like to take a look at in the meantime. As I always say, everyone, take care, and I will see you next time.